what's happening last night in Sweden? Sweden. Who would believe this? Sweden.
Well, actually, nothing bad happened in Sweden that night. So was Donald Trump lying, confused, or spinning? There have been a few moments like that in Trump's first, at times chaotic month on the job. His supporters say he's delivering on his promises. His critics say he uses conspiracy theories and bends the facts to suit his needs. When does spin become a lie? And is Trump's technique on the facts really all that different from what we've witnessed for years? The insiders are here on that. Strategist Jamie Watt, Kathleen Monk, and David Hurley, all here tonight. Before you say anything, I want to show you a couple more of these sort of fact-stretching moments. Watch this.
Isn't it amazing the way they say there's no voter fraud? Folks, it's a rigged system, and it's a rigged election, believe me.
It looked, honestly, it looked like 1.5 million people, whatever it was, but it went all the way back to the Washington Monument. You've seen what happened in Paris and Nice. All over Europe, it's happening. It's gotten to a point where it's not even being reported.
All right. Don't want to sound like we're picking on Donald Trump, because we could run a number of politicians. These are just sort of the most recent. But let's start with, in general terms, how in politics do you define a lie?
A lie is something that's not true. And I think this discussion we've been having...
There'd be a lot of lies in politics.
I think there's this discussion we've been having about these alt-facts. I don't think an alt-fact exists. I think an alt-fact is a bold-faced lie. End of discussion. I think what we talk about sometimes in politics, when politicians say one thing and do another, break a promise, that can be different. And that can come from generally from two places. One, from a place of sort of funny business where they decided they weren't going to keep their promise all along, bad, or it can come from changing circumstances. When they get in to power, they see things differently than they saw them on the campaign trail, and they aren't always able to keep their promise. And I think we have to have some flexibility on that.
How do you define it, Kathleen?
Well, I think a lie in politics is the same kind of thing you teach your children. You know, it's a statement that is untrue, like Jamie said, but there has to be that kind of intent to deceive. And that's really what defines a lie. And I think that, though, it's very unhelpful when people tend to conflate spin and lying because, frankly, in some ways it's unhelpful because persuasive argument and argumentation that a lot of us do, interpret the facts to make our arguments, might be a spin, but it's not a lie. And as a political practitioner, you can take it to a certain level, make a persuasive argument, and fight around the lunch table or in Parliament, and that's not lying. And when we conflate those two issues, spinning and lying, I think it'd be challenging, and it actually kind of breeds the cynicism that kind of erodes democracy overall.
I wonder whether that translates to, to the ordinary general public. I get it in terms of, people like you who work in the back rooms make that distinction, but I wonder at times whether everybody does. David, where are you on this?
Well, I think that's a really important point, because I think as practitioners and people who've worked in the business and worked with politicians of good faith, we know how things that you promise in an election campaign, for example, can be wrong because of excessive optimism or because of facts you didn't know rather than intent to deceive at the time. I don't think Obama was lying when he said he would close Guantanamo Bay. I think he found out things after he was elected that told him he couldn't close Guantanamo Bay. But I think for
what about electoral reform?
For a lot of people, this is a distinction without a difference. I mean, my surveys tell me that 50% of Canadians think politicians lie regularly, and the rest of them think they lie some of the time. So that's an important base on which to understand how people will react to Trump. The fact that people are calling him a liar is not necessarily going to damage him with the citizens, because people think all politicians lie. I think you have to get at the different nature and character of Trump's lies in order to really damage him.
Okay, on the electoral reform, though, is that just, do the three of you see that as just a broken promise versus a lie?
Yeah, I think it's a broken promise, and I think the Prime Minister is going to pay for his broken promise, as politicians do. One of the problems we have in the system that we currently use, Peter, is that you're out until you're in. And Stephen Lewis famously said, whereas I haven't got it quite right, but that he learned more in the first 30 days of transition to the Ray government than he had in 30 years in public life, because until you get in, until you sit behind that desk, you actually don't know what the facts are. And in some ways, our hyper-partisan approach to governing doesn't actually get us the best promises on the campaign trail, because people making them actually don't know any better.
We've seen recent examples in Canadian politics. You know, the Conservative Party leadership candidates, there's been two that have come out, Andrew Scheer and Stephen Blaney, who basically said in a fundraising email recently that Justin Trudeau wants to legalize heroin. Now, that is just not true. And I would argue that that's a lie, and it's not a spin or a different interpretation of the facts. That's untrue, and it can be proven as untrue. But I mean, certainly Trump nor these Conservative leadership candidates aren't the first people to lie in politics, right? Like, I think probably in our experience, one of the largest lies that took place was the weapons of mass destruction that took place around the Iraq War. And we all saw Colin Powell go to the UN and make this case, and we saw the photos. And that was really Karl Rove.
Now, was he lying, Colin Powell, or was he going with the facts that have been, or alleged facts that have been given to him?
So I would have drawn the line back, the dotted line back to Karl Rove, who you know may or may not have orchestrated the leak from the Pentagon that White House journalists then questioned the White House about. Then yes, we've had reports of weapons of mass destruction. So then you get the double sourcing going on. So was it orchestrated? Lots of the writing around it say yes, right? But whether it was Colin Powell, I don't know.
I want to get to this question of alternative facts, which is what Jamie brought up. And it all arose out of the interview on Meet the Press, the NBC program, with the host Chuck Todd and Kellyanne Conway, who is one of Trump's communications experts, although I haven't seen her around the last little while. I don't know what happened. But watch this exchange from about 2 weeks ago.
Why did he do that? It undermines the credibility of the entire White House press office on day one.
Don't be so overly dramatic about it, Chuck. You're saying it's a falsehood, and they're giving Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that. But the point remains.
Wait a minute. Alternative facts?
Is there such a thing as alternative facts?
Well, I think that actually I would say that I can imagine the scenario in which there are. Because we shouldn't underestimate the fact that media has always played an interpretive role and brings its own narrative to the way it covers things. We all know, from those of us who've been involved in campaigns, that when your campaign's going badly, you tend to get worse photographs on TV or in the newspapers than you do when your campaign is going well. I reminded of the incident of Robert Stanfield dropping the football in 1968. Well, I'm told he caught every other ball that was thrown to him, but the one picture of him dropping it was the one picture every Canadian saw. So a conservative being interviewed at that point could have said, well, an alternative fact is that he caught 9 out of 10 footballs that were thrown to him. But that's not the way Kellyanne Conway, Sean Spicer, and the Trump people are using it. They're not presenting a different picture of the same thing. They're attacking truth itself. They are attacking the very notion that there can be truth. And they're saying that what Donald Trump believes, backed up by his victory in the election, is every bit as valid as the objectively known truth. And that is fundamentally different than what we've seen.
And they're getting away with it because we've had a structural change. Because until recently, we all got our news from the same source. And then we decided what we would do with that news individually. Now people are getting their news from echo chambers where all they're doing is pinging off each other and their own point of view, and they're working each other up to convince each other of a certain set of facts. And there's no fact check. So what's happened is public decided that it's time to throw out the elites, but with that, we threw out the people that actually knew some things about some of these topics. We threw out the fact checkers. We threw out the people to hold people's feet to the fire. And now anyone can say anything, including that we've got terrorism problems in Sweden, which is demonstrably not true.
And it's a challenge for media, because how do you maintain this neutrality? I mean, your network wrestles with this. We've seen CNN and NBC wrestle with this. How do you maintain that neutrality, but actually challenge those lies when you hear them? So you're trying to have this balance, present two sides of the story, but there are lies. And so we've seen these anchors like Don Lemon just shut down whole interviews recently.
You've seen some people who believe that he believes what he's saying. In other words, Trump. He actually believes that. You know, whether he's delusional or whether he has a Napoleonic complex or whatever it is, he actually believes it. And therefore, it's not a lie. He actually believes it.
And you have to go back to the audience that's listening to him. Remember, Donald Trump was in the media for decades and certainly on TV for over a decade, like as a news person. So people at home know this man. They feel like they have a connection to him in some ways. And so they may trust him more than the politicians that David referenced in terms of the polling. And that's scary. But we talked on this program before about how Trump has kind of thrown out the playbook, right? And has changed the rules in some ways of politics. And what's amazing is that he hasn't really apologized for these lies that he's been called out.
But Kathleen, why would he apologize? It's working.
Exactly.
We had every headline from every broadcaster, every internet source saying that the Trump campaign people were in constant contact with the Russians. Constant contact. Russians leaked from intelligence sources, reputable intelligence sources. Then he goes on for, I don't know how long it was, Peter, an hour and a half, whatever, on this crazy news conference. And guess what? We're not talking about Russians anymore. We're talking about the crazy conference.
Well, I think that one of the things you learn from that is that if critics of his want to be effective, I think they're going to have to pick their spots.
100%.
And I think that so far, the scattershot number of weird things and lies that are coming out of the White House and people running after every one of them just creates this general sense, well, they're against him and they're saying he's a liar and all politicians lie. But I think people are going to have to zero in on the things that really matter and drive those things home. And whether or not he believes them, whether he's delusional or lying, they're not true. And it is the media's job to say they're not true.
Okay, I got less than a minute left. Is there a time in politics where lying is okay, that you actually need to lie?
Only for the national security of the country.
Correct.
National security, that's it.
Correct. And you're absolutely entitled to lie for national security with one proviso, that as soon as the danger is past, then you come clean with the country and explain why you made the choices that you did. But at the end of the day, we do elect people to keep us safe, and there are times when you can't tell everybody everything you know.
Have they ever done that? Not lie, but come clean afterwards?
That's a good question.
The closest may be the Iraq War, and they never came clean until they were called out, right? And they were proven wrong. Anyway, it's a fascinating discussion. I'm sure that many people are having it at home tonight as well, trying to understand how that L word plays into the current situation. And as we said, not just in the U.S., but elsewhere. Good to have the three of you back.
Great to be here.